Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And I just want to welcome you guys back. It's awesome. You're on chapter 2. Be encouraged, get excited. Look at the top of the book. There is a solution. Yes, there is a solution to your addiction, to your alcoholism. And it has helped millions of people. So there's no reason why it can't help you too. Once again, I'm going to remind you guys questions in the comment sections relating to any of the material that we're going to cover today. And let's just jump in. Like I've done before, I'm just going to stop and make comments where I see fit over some information that's usually been brought to me over the last 3 sponsors who I've had. I've mentioned all had about 40 years. So as you can imagine, that's, over 120 years of varied digestion of the first 164 pages in their own vast spiritual experiences. So you can probably take this information as being pretty good, not to mention my own years in the program. So here we go. We of Alcoholics Anonymous know thousands of men and women who were once just as hopeless as Bill. Nearly all have recovered. So the reason why I'm highlighting recovered, which I maybe didn't go into much detail about on chapter 1 or even the introduction, is language is really important. The way you phrase things, the way you perceive things, the way you label things, it has way more impact on our psyche than we probably give merit to. So language, while you're reading the big book, pay attention to the language. It's there for a reason. Words are specifically written, and I think there's a lot of information that they had to sort through to determine like what would be the most impactful language to use. Pay attention to that, please. They have solved the drink problem. It's a big deal, or drug, doesn't matter. We are average Americans. All sections of this country and many of its occupations are represented, as well as many political, economic, social, and religious backgrounds. We are people who normally would not mix. How true is that? But there exists among us a fellowship, a friendliness, and understanding which is indescribably wonderful. We are like the passengers of a great liner the moment after rescue from shipwreck, when camaraderie, joyousness, and democracy pervade the vessel from steerage to captain's table. Unlike the feelings of the ship's passengers, however, our joy and escape from disaster does not subside as we go in our individual ways. That feeling of having shared in a common peril is one element in the powerful cement which binds us. But that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined. The tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. Once again, guys, please bear with me if I'm fumbling my words or if I'm not pronouncing words correctly. An illness of this sort, we have come to believe it is an illness. The DSM-5 and probably the 4, it is maybe even the ones before that as well. It is a disease. Alcoholism is a disease. It involves those about us in a way no other human sickness can. If a person has cancer, all are sorry for him and no one is angry or hurt. But not so much with the alcoholic illness, for with it there goes annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. It engulfs all whose lives touch the sufferers. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, warped lives of blameless children, sad wives, and parents. Anyone can increase the list. We hope this volume will inform and comfort those who are or who may be affected. There are many. Highly competent psychiatrists who have dealt with us have found it sometimes impossible to persuade an alcoholic to discuss his situation without reserve. Strangely enough, wives, parents, and intimate friends usually find us even more unapproachable than do the psychiatrist and the doctor. I don't know about you guys, but for me, I was a very closed off individual who didn't understand feelings and emotions very well, who didn't want to sort of lose my edge in the world or my pride. So I didn't really tell doctors the full story of what was taking place. And so how could they really help me, right? I couldn't give them all the symptoms, all the scenarios, all the problems that was going on for me because I didn't want to be viewed as somebody who may have like serious issues. I was too scared. Fear of judgment, that's sort of this huge corrosive thread that runs through me, is the fear of judgment. Maybe you can relate. But the ex-problem drinker who has found the solution, who is properly armed with facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished, right? And so that speaks to the idea of step 12, which you'll learn a little bit more about and the importance of as we go on. But if you're at a place where you're trying to talk to a doctor rather than a fellow alcoholic or drug addict who has recovered, scant chances that you're going to be totally revealing out of worry that they won't understand or think that you're weak or think that you're dumb or broken and defective. So it's so important for somebody who's recovered from drugs and alcohol abuse can go and spread the word rather than somebody who claims themselves to be a professional. Anyways, back to it. That the man who is making the approach has had the same difficulty, that he obviously knows what he is talking about. This whole deportment shouts at the new prospect that he is a man with a real answer, that he has no attitude of holier than thou, nothing whatever except a sincere desire to be helpful, that there are no fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. These are the conditions we have found most effective. After such an approach, many take up their beds and walk again. None of us makes a sole vocation of this work, nor do we think its effectiveness would be increased if we did. We feel that the elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. Please remember that. The elimination of our drinking in recovery is simply a beginning to determining what causes us to sort of leach into drugs and alcohol as the sort of the saving grace for our life, or the calming tool, or the thing that made us feel like life was worth living, or something that we just turn to all the time. Like that will be revealed the further we go along in the first 164 pages, the more you dig into your step work, the more you attend meetings. I promise you more will be revealed. And consider that there is a long period of reconstruction ahead. It's not just stopping drinking. Really important. A much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us. We're back here. In our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. All of us spend much of our spare time in the sort of effort which we are going to describe. A few are fortunate enough to be so situated that they can give nearly all their time to the work. If we keep on the way we're going, there is little doubt that there much good will result. But the surface of the problem would hardly be scratched. Those of us who live in large cities are overcome by the reflection that close by hundreds are dropping into oblivion every day. Many could recover if they had the opportunity we have enjoyed. How then shall we present that which has been so freely given us? We have concluded to publish an anonymous volume setting forth the problem as we see it. We shall bring to the task our combined experience and knowledge. This suggests a useful program for anyone, I repeat that, a useful program for anyone concerned with the drinking problem. I too say drugging problem, nonetheless, same. Of necessity, there will have to be discussion of matters medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. We are aware that these matters are far from their nature, far from their very nature controversial. Nothing would please us so much as to write a book which would contain no basis for contention or argument. We shall do our utmost to achieve that ideal. Most of us sense that real tolerance of other people's shortcomings and viewpoints and respect for their opinions are attitudes which make us more useful to others. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. Please remember this as you're going forward. Service work, altruism, working with another alcoholic is something that is going to assure you a certain degree of peace of mind that no doctor, counseling session, and sometimes even step work will do to touching your heart and changing your perspective and giving you that courage to go on another day when you're really in these low points of life that do come in sobriety. Please remember that. Look at my highlighting. Awesome. You may have already have asked yourself why it is that all of us become so very ill from drinking. Doubtless you're curious to discover how and why. In the face of expert opinion to the contrary, we have recovered. This is important once again. This is what you've really recovered of. You've recovered from a hopeless condition of body and mind. So never will I say that I've recovered from alcoholism. I mean, I'm never cured from it, so to speak, but I'm most certainly a recovered alcoholic, recovered from a hopeless state of body and mind. If you're an alcoholic who wants to get over it, you may already be asking, what do I have to do? It is the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. We shall tell you what we have done. Before going into detailed discussion, it may be well to summarize some points as we see them. Many times people have said to us, I can take it or leave it alone. Why can't he? Why don't you drink like a gentleman or quit? That fellow can't handle his liquor. Why don't you try beer and wine? Lay off the hard stuff. His willpower must be weak. He could stop if he wanted to. She's such a sweet girl. I think he'd stop for her sake. The doctor told him that if he never drank again, it would kill him. But there he is, all lit up again. So remember, it has nothing to do with intelligence or willpower, right? As it was mentioned in the previous chapter, you may be incredibly strong and powerful and successful in some aspects of your life, but when it comes to alcohol and drugs, you seem to have a real twist in the willpower or ability to stop and remain stopped. Now, these are commonplace observations on drinkers, which we hear all the time. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. We see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours. Moderate drinkers have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely if they have a good reason for it. They can take it or leave it alone. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years early before his time. Sorry, I'm putting in words here. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. If a sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of a doctor becomes operative, this man can also stop or moderate. Although he may find it difficult and troublesome, he may even need medical attention. But what about the real alcoholic? He may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker, but at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. Here is the fellow who has been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. He is a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He is seldom mildly intoxicated. Who ever really even wanted to be mildly intoxicated? I rarely wanted to have a few drinks. I always wanted to be absolutely blitzed. I love that feeling. Maybe you did too. Can you relate? He is always more or less insanely drunk. His disposition while drinking resembles his normal nature but little. He may be one of the finest fellows in the world, yet let him drink for a day, and he frequently becomes disgustingly, even dangerously antisocial. He is a positive genius for getting tight at exactly the wrong moments, particularly when some important decision must be made or engagement kept. He is often perfectly sensible and well-balanced concerning everything except liquor. But in that respect, he is incredibly dishonest and selfish. You'll start to learn a little bit more that honesty sort of comes up as being a crux of the problem. Transparency, vulnerability. We'll go into that more in the future. He often possesses special abilities, skills, and aptitudes, and has a promising career ahead of him. He uses his gifts to build up a bright outlook for his family and himself, and then pulls the structure down on his head by a senseless series of sprees. He is the fellow who goes to bed so intoxicated he ought to sleep the clock round. Who knows about 2-day hangovers, hey? How awful are those? Yet early the next morning, he searches madly for the bottle he misplaced the night before. If he can afford it, he may have the liquor concealed all over his house to be certain no one gets his entire supply away from him to throw down the waste pipe. As matters grow worse, he begins to use a combination of high-powered sedatives and liquor to quiet his nerves so he can go to work. And then comes the day when he simply cannot make it and gets drunk all over again. Perhaps he goes to a doctor who gives him morphine or some sedative with which to taper off. Then he begins to appear at hospitals and sanitariums. This is by no means a comprehensive picture of the true alcoholic, as our behavior patterns vary. Remember that, guys. We're not all the same in how we react and the stories and paths we took to finally get to AA or NA. It's not all the same, and that's okay. Why does he behave like this? If hundreds of experiences have shown him that one drink means another debacle with all its attendant suffering and humiliation, why is it that he takes that one drink? Why can't he stay on the water wagon? What has become of the common sense and willpower that he still sometimes displays with respect to other matters? Perhaps there will never be a full answer to these questions. Opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. We are not sure why. Once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. We cannot answer the riddle. We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from the drink, as he may do for months or years, but reacts like other men, we are equally positive that once he takes any alcohol whatever into his system, something happens, both in the bodily and mental sense, what makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. Okay, so science, I guess, has uncovered that in the alcoholic, I don't know if it's genes or whatever, don't quote me on this, I am not a doctor, that alcohol turns into something like a THQ or THIQ or something like that, and we digest alcohol and it reacts in our system much differently than it does other people. And also I want you to mention that a lot of people think that because they're able to stop for months or years, like that's also a common thread that you'll find in the meeting. Some people have been able to stop drinking for months and years, but as soon as they pick up again, whether it's 5 years later, some stories you hear about 20 years later, it comes crashing down. Right? There's this place inside of us that does not want to admit that we are real alcoholics. Let me just check and see. I want to break this video up into 2 parts again. Okay, let's just read one more page and then we'll stop for a break. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of alcoholics centers in his mind rather than his body. Please remember this. The main problem centers in the mind rather than in his body. Impulse control, spirit, perspective. It'll all make more sense as we go, guys. Don't feel like you have to know everything that we went over the first chapter by now. Don't feel like it's vital that you're absorbing every single word here. It's all going to make sense the more you dive into this stuff. It's not a race, okay? If you ask him why he started on that last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of the 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. They sound like the philosophy of a man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so that he can't feel the ache. If you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, he will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. Once in a while, he may tell the truth. See? Once in a while, truth, honesty. How honest are you? Are you even aware? Are you in blind spots right now in your life that are stopping you from being honest? Anyways, here we go. And the truth, strange to say, is usually that he has no more idea why he took the first drink than you have. Some drinkers have excuses with which they are satisfied part of the time, but in their hearts, they really do not know why they do it. Once this malady has a real hold, they are baffled lot. There's the obsession that somehow, someday, they will beat the game, but they often suspect they are down for the count. How true is this? Few realize. In a vague way, their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal, but everybody hopefully awaits the day when the sufferer will rouse himself from this lethargy and assert his power of will. I think that is a good place to stop. Remember, guys, nothing to do with your willpower, nothing to do with intelligence, and more is going to be revealed. Stay tuned. Go grab a coffee. That's part 1 of chapter 2. Maybe go for a smoke. A lot of people smoke in AA. Just take a deep breath. You're giving yourself a gift you've yet to fully unwrap. And I'm proud of you guys for being here. Bye-bye. See you in a bit.